everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, whether it's your morning, afternoon, evening. It's a huge pleasure to have you here. My name is Alison Prout. I'm the director of the International Network for Conservation and Religion. It's easier to say INCR. I'll be moderating the session for you today, and as most of you know, we'll be talking about faith-consistent use of assets, in particular focusing on the use of construction and buildings. We've got a wonderful array of contributors here today. I'll introduce them more in as we go along, but first I wanted to give you an overview of the programme as a whole. Thank you also for introducing yourselves in the chat. It's great to see some familiar names in there. And I suggest that most of you are here because you are either considering joining in with this programme or have already committed. We really hope that we can help you delve more deeply into the key areas of the long-term plans. As I said, today we're looking at one in particular, but I want to start with an overview of the programme before moving on to that. We've got an hour and a half today. As I said, we've got some wonderful speakers. Please do post questions as and when they come to you. So let's have a think about what the programme is as a whole. Some of you may have joined us for the first of these webinar programmes, where we covered the importance of the programme, what it is and why now. There's a few key aspects to this programme. The first being that we're looking to create a framework for faith-motivated environmental action. The key element to it is that it is faith-led and faith-motivated. We're not trying to create a structure or a process that forces any of you to conform to determined criteria. This is about you, the faiths, figuring out what works for your theology and your context and sharing it on a greater stage. So the Faith Long-Term Plans programme works with the biggest organised sector of civil society, the faith. That's you. Why do we do that? Why are we trying to do that? We're helping to help you channel your assets, investments and influence to drive practical action to influence, benefit people and planet. We're aiming to create over 100 real-world action plans driven by faiths around the world. It's a partnership programme with the UK government, and this is because, as most of you know, the UK government are presidents of the forthcoming COP, which will be held in Glasgow about this time next year. We're calling it the Long-Term Plan Programme because we are hoping that the plans will cover a sort of 7 to 10 year period, and that works very neatly as an overlay for the Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. The plans cover 7 key areas. The first is the one in bold, which we're covering today, which is faith-consistent use of assets. And those of you who have received all our publicity probably know that there will be future webinars on the other topics also. So how and when are we going to do this? At the moment, we're in the first phase. So we're recruiting groups. Some of you have already committed. Some of you are thinking, is this something that we can do? We're looking at how we can support you in your plan creation. And part of that is this webinar series. And another part is going through a sort of process of mutual review on the plans. Part of that will be looking to see whether there are any partnerships or technical input that we can offer. We'll be launching these plans in their full glory later on in the year, and of course making sure that this feeds into COP26. We're looking at this as a 2-phase programme. As I said, this is phase 1. Phase 2 is all about just getting this stuff done. It's about delivery, and it's about wondering whether there are frameworks and partnerships that could be created to take this forward. We're talking about faith-consistent assets today. What does this mean? Why is it so important? I mean, what do I mean when I talk about faith consistent? Really, I think it means that there's a clear articulation of faith values and a systematic approach to living those out in the management of assets. And I think this is particularly important in sectors that are predominantly secular, and where there's a clear link to faith values that might be considered challenging or countercultural. And I think that that's really important to remember, that that might be one of the premium contributions that faiths can offer. Faith consistency matters also because the strength of religious environmentalism comes from its rootedness and its conceptual framework. Connections may need to be made, theology may need to be revisited, but it all exists out there. Faiths do know what their connection to nature is, and broadly it's shared across faiths. We don't necessarily need to reinvent to move this forward. So faith consistent use of assets, it's a huge topic. We're not going to try and cover it all today. As you can see, we're just picking out construction, buildings, healthcare, medical facilities, purchasing and consumption today. There will be further focused webinars on financial investments as a category in and of itself, and also natural assets. Both of those will be held early in 2021. So let's think about buildings. Faiths own and manage a huge amount of buildings. We tend to sort of focus very much on our places of worship as the first thought of what a religious building is, but it goes way beyond that. Faiths manage schools, colleges, universities, hospitals, hospices, healthcare facilities, as well as hospitality venues. I'll be going on to talk about one hospitality venue in particular, but first I want to introduce you to Reverend Susan Hendershot, who is coming to join us today from Interfaith Power and Light, based in, well, she's based in DC, aren't you? Although I know you're headquartered in possibly a sunnier California than where you are right now. I won't try and preview what Susan's going to say too much, but Susan's going to help us to think about where communities can come together around their shared asset, as in their building, and what they can do to transform their energy consumption in their collective asset, but also what the ramifications of that are when they think about what that means for them as individuals and their own households. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Alison. That was just the perfect intro to what I'd like to share with you today. And I'm going to try to share my screen, and we'll see if mine is working. So I want to start just by thanking all of the partners who are making this webinar series available, and for today's, our friends at the International Network for Conservation and Religion, Faith Invest, and the World Wildlife Fund's Beliefs and Values Initiative. I'm really grateful to be with you today. And again, I'm Reverend Susan Hendershot. I'm president of Interfaith Power and Light. Interfaith Power and Light was founded 20 years ago as a religious response to global warming. And our mission is to inspire and mobilize people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on climate change. Our vision is a stable climate where humans live in right and just relationship, interconnected with a healthy, thriving natural world. And today I want to talk with you about our Cool Congregations program, which is one way to address the faith consistent use of assets within buildings and construction. And our unique US-based energy stewardship program helps congregations reduce the carbon footprint of their facilities, and it engages their members in reducing their carbon footprint at home. So the program aims to educate and inspire, but it also saves congregations money, which means more money for their missions, which we think is very important. And so I want to walk you through the flow of the program so you get a sense of how the program works. We offer several resources for congregations. First of all, our startup kit. We have two carbon calculators available, one for congregations, one for households. We offer a certification program for congregations, as well as a Cool Congregations Challenge. And then we offer an opportunity to plant trees as carbon offsets as well. So we think that offering that program can also be a way to practice good stewardship of resources. And the startup kit that we have available is free for congregations. It's a download from our website, and it contains 5 steps to become a cool congregation. This includes how to start a green team, write a mission statement, form a plan for action. And we think that the green team itself is the most important component, because that is actually how the work gets done. We need a team to sort of lead the process. The kit also includes a list of suggested actions for reducing your carbon footprint, called 25 Steps Under $25 and 125 Steps Over $25. And once a congregation has a green team formed, IPL invites them to come back and measure their congregation's carbon footprint with the Cool Congregations calculator, take steps to reduce their energy use, and to measure again at the end of the year and celebrate by getting certified. So I just wanted to show you a little snapshot of the congregational calculator page. This was developed in partnership with the University of California at Berkeley and the Cool Climate Network there. So congregations can download a checklist to fill out to make it much easier to find all of the data that they need to input into the calculator. And then the calculator is pre-filled with default data based on the average use of a similar size congregation in their area. So the number of staff, the number of visitors per week, and the size of the facility are really important factors in determining energy intensity. So we measure the facility, which is the amount of fuel used to heat, cool, and power the building, plus water, waste, and recycling. We measure transportation. So this is staff work-related miles, as well as travel by members to worship. We measure food, which is the frequency that various types of animal products, grain, produce, and drinks are served at congregational meals every week. And procurement, so the dollars spent on printing, supplies, maintenance, and anything else that a congregation is purchasing. So once all of that data is input into the calculator, then there are downloadable reports that are available so that these can be presented to the congregation's governing board, to the green team members, and to inform the congregation not only of the energy use, but also what their plans actually are to reduce their energy use and their carbon footprint. So we have a variety of ways that the information is presented, as you can see. And then at the bottom of the report, there is also an opportunity to buy carbon offsets through Interfaith Power and Light's Carbon Covenant program, which is a tree planting program. We have a very robust program planting trees, especially in Tanzania right now. So it will show not only can you donate $5 to plant one tree, but we'll show you the dollar amount to offset your carbon footprint entirely. So we think that's a really great feature to have as well. And then users are encouraged to come back after a year of making improvements to their facility to see how much they have reduced their carbon footprint. And if they have reduced by 10% or more, they qualify for certification as a cool congregation. So right now, this new calculator was launched in June, and we have so far 59 emissions reports that have been saved since the calculator was launched this past June. We also have a similar calculator available for households, because one of the things that we know is that congregations can serve as role models for their members. And so we want this to be carried out to individual households as well. So the household calculator has slightly different measurements than the congregational facility, but in some ways very similar. So people can track their travel, their home, electric use, heating fuel, their food, and goods and services. And then again, they can find ways to take action and pledge to reduce their energy use as an act of faith as well. So again, we do offer the certification program. So once a congregation has reduced by 10% or more, they can demonstrate that information to us, and we certify them as a cool congregation. So anywhere from 10% or more of their energy use. And of course, the more, the better as far as we're concerned. But certification demonstrates a congregation's leadership in their community by showing that it's possible to reduce emissions, care for our common home, and often save money in the process. On our website, you can also find stories of certified congregations, because we think that these stories are very inspiring and demonstrate to other congregations what they can do to lower their own energy use and their own carbon emissions. And we try to have a lot of different stories available, because we know that different stories inspire different actions. We have 47 certified congregations so far, and that is always growing. So we're very excited about that. And then another thing that we do is our Cool Congregations Challenge. This is an annual national contest to recognize congregations that are becoming more energy efficient, becoming more sustainable, and there are 5 entry categories. So Cool Congregations Planner are for those congregations that are just in the starting point. They're just making their plans for how they're going to reduce. They're doing energy audits, planning reports, and often fundraising for their projects. And then we have an Energy Saver, a renewable role model, Sacred Ground Steward, which has to do with how they're using their land around their facility. And then Community Inspiration, which I think is a wonderful category, because it's often how they're engaging with others within their community in a project to inspire greater action in a community, as well as just within their own congregation. Again, we have stories of these challenge winners on our website available, so that people can get inspired and see what their own congregation can do to install solar, become more energy efficient, do community gardens or other community advocacy work. So very exciting stories there to share with folks. The challenge, if you're a US-based congregation or know of some in the US, you can apply today. The deadline is December 15th, and we've expanded the project completion time to 2018, 2019, and 2020. Because of COVID, it's been really difficult to get projects over the finish line this year. And I just want to close with this great quote from Rebecca Solnit, an author. She says, "Optimism assumes that all will go well without our effort. Pessimism assumes it's all irredeemable. Both let us stay home and do nothing. Hope for me is meant to sense that the future is unpredictable and that we don't actually know what will happen, but we know we may be able to write it ourselves. Hope is the belief that what we do might matter, and understanding that the future is not yet written." And I think that's beautiful, because part of hope for me is knowing that what we do might matter, and even all of these steps to take care of our buildings, our facilities, and expand that work into our communities, to me is really a sign of hope. So thank you again for inviting me to be here today. Excited to hear our other speakers.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was fantastic. And I know for one, I have already got a few questions for you for the Q&A later. And I hope that those of you who are also listening in can think how they might be able to tap into Susan's wonderful brain and her experience and those of her colleagues in creating this campaign. Something that Susan said really struck me, which was different stories inspire different types of action. And it's exactly with that in mind that I want to share a story about, in one sense, a specific building, but in fact, it's sort of broader than that. It's about how faith groups can be clear about their faith framework, their faith motivation, the imperative in their work, and how they can use that sort of beginning point to be systematic and ambitious and idealistic in the way they manage their assets. The photograph you can see on the screen at the moment, I hope this is actually working this time and you can see it, is a building very close to my heart. It's somewhere I worked for a number of years, and my friends and former colleagues at the Britain Yearly Meeting, Quakers in the UK, have kindly allowed me to share their story of the sustainability actions that they've taken for this particular building, and also a pilgrimage and hospitality site in Cumbria, which is northwest England, for those of you who don't know. Friends House is a large listed building in London. It's used as a conference site, a hospitality venue, and also has staff office accommodation in it. I want to share with you just some sort of background about this sustainability work. We're going to go through the strategy that they've put together for the next 10 years for this particular building. But I think it's really important to highlight the fact that they very consciously start from a point of belief. What is their faith? What does it mean to be a Quaker? And what does it mean for Quakers to manage this building? And the answer is something pretty spectacular. I think you'll all agree. I can say this because I no longer work there. What we can see is a decade-long strategy, which encompasses all areas of management, from the energy consumed to IT systems, travel, food purchasing, etc., etc. We don't have time to go through the entire plan, unfortunately. I will gladly share this with you later on if it is of interest, and I know that folk in Friends House will also help to answer any of your questions. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the scope and the scale of what they're up to, and doing so hoping that it gives you some idea as to how you might be able to use any similar buildings or opportunities you have. Remembering, of course, that buildings don't necessarily have just to be places of worship. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, faiths have huge influence over educational institutions, healthcare facilities, hospitals, maternity hospitals, medical clinics, universities, as well as pilgrimage venues and cafes, bookshops even. And all of this work can be done equally across all of those venues. I'm going to just mention catering here, because I think that that's something that we'll come up against in a later conversation in the webinar series. But I think food is a really important issue, particularly in a conference venue, where I think you'll all agree with me that the most successful meetings are ones fueled by plenty of cake. And I think that what they've done here is a really clear and conscious link between what local production and what social production means. And they have created programs with ex-offenders to bake cakes and flapjacks and cookies and other goodies that provide employment and security for ex-offenders in vulnerable times of their lives, but also contribute to the sustainability of this as a venue. Another impressive aspect of this plan, which I hope you'll agree, is this clear alignment with the SDGs. I mentioned right at the start that this is intended to be a something like a 10-year program, and that we are hoping that this will give a framework for faiths to map themselves against concurrent political processes, particularly the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, because there is so much focus on these particular frameworks that it makes it an easy way in which faiths can engage in secular processes and make sure that their very significant contribution is appreciated. That was a really quick whistle-stop flick through a strategic plan that you won't have been able to read. As I said, I will gladly share it with all of you as well as other documentation, but I wanted to try and give you that clear link between a faith community who have stopped, thought, what does it mean to be a Quaker? What does it mean? What does that therefore mean about living sustainably? And how can we carry those processes through very consciously into the way in which we manage this significant physical asset? And going beyond that, not just looking at the building itself, but the fact that it attracts hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people day in, well, not at the moment, but it usually attracts hundreds and hundreds of people day in, day out, who are all coming and being inspired by, oh, look, they have bees on the roof. Oh, look, they have renewable energy production on site. Oh, look, they do this, they do that. And they do all of that because they're Quakers and that's what they believe. And I think that's a really powerful form of witness in the world, not just for faith values, but also for environmentalism as a whole. Someone else who can talk very well about faith values and environmentalism as a whole is Dr. Peter Nitschke, who's joining us from Germany today. Peter comes from Plastic Bank. Hello, Peter. And he's going to talk to us about how Plastic Bank is supporting faith communities in the global north as well as in the global south in addressing the issue of ocean plastic as well as more sustainable procurement themselves. Over to you, Peter.
Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with you and share with you what Plastic Bank is doing. Plastic Bank actually is not a faith-based group. We are a social enterprise, and our goal is to eliminate ocean plastic and to improve lives. And I want to share with you what we are exactly doing. The issue we want to address is that about 8 million tons of plastic are going into the ocean every year, though that's one dump truck a minute, or 400 billion beverages bottles. It would be also putting all those plastic waste into 50-kilo bags and staple them up to the moon. That is what we're putting into our oceans. And if you continue like this, in 2050, the amount of plastic and the amount of fish in the ocean, or the volume, will be the same. Our vision is to gather 1 billion people to end ocean plastic and monetize waste, improving lives. Our core values are to gather together not only the plastic, but also people who want to engage, to reveal the value not only in plastic, but also the the value of informal waste pickers, who are the poorest of the poor, which we want to empower. One of our core values is love. We believe that everything that a business should be doing is not about profit. It should be about loving, providing a service. And the fourth core value is becoming. We believe we should become the people the planet needs today to address the problems that we are facing. And in that way, even though we are a business, I think that core values would also be true for many faith groups as well. What are we? Where are we? We are operating in 5 countries, even though we are based in Vancouver, where our headquarters is located. We work in Haiti, the Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil, and Egypt. Those are countries where a lot of plastic waste is mismanaged and is going into the ocean. And we have set up 350 collection points in those countries where people can bring their plastic for it to be recycled. We have collected 15 million kilos of plastic. We work with more than 6,000 informal plastic collectors. And through this, we have prevented the emission of 23,000 tons of CO2. How are we improving lives? Basically, the plastic that we collect, we sell it back to the industry as a kind of a fair trade plastic raw material. That means the industry partners pay a premium price, and we give that premium price back into the communities of the waste collectors. So people can earn cash for it. So they earn about twice as much as what they have earned before. But we also work with other groups to provide further services, which could be clean water, fresh food, cooking fuel, power, cell phone service, school tuition in Haiti. Before the pandemic, families can pay school tuition in plastic bottles. We also work with micro insurances to provide health insurance for our waste collectors. And we also have last mile solutions for digital savings, providing people who never had bank accounts with bank accounts and saving accounts. And we do this in a circular economical model where the waste is being collected. People who collect it, they get rewards and can access a better living standard. The plastic then is processed back into raw material, transported to the factories where it's being manufactured into new material. And we think it is important to do it that way. Instead of cleaning up the ocean, prevent the plastic getting into the ocean. And I want to mention also that only about 10% of the plastic that we currently are producing is being recycled, while about 40% is recyclable. So that means a lot of value is being lost to humanity by just discarding the plastic in our extract, produce, use, and discard linear economic model, which is not sustainable in the future. The whole thing is, the whole supply chain is being monitored and run through a blockchain application. Through this, we have on-time monitoring for the whole blockchain, for the whole supply chain. We know where every kilogram of plastic is coming from. It gives also transparency to our collectors. They know how much plastic they have collected, what is the price that they should be getting, what are the rewards that they have access to, and in that way everything is transparent and can be digitally monitored. One of our customers is Henkel, who is using our plastic as a raw material for this shower gel bottle. And so people who purchase this bottle are basically helping to prevent ocean plastic and to help poor waste collectors in Haiti. In that way, we have done a study, or somebody has done a study about us in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. That was somebody from the London College of Economics. She did her dissertation on that, and she came to the conclusion that Plastic Bank could possibly contribute to 14 of the 17 SDGs. And we want also to do a study and see what is really happening, but this is potentially what we could do through our model. Why do we engage with people of faith? Well, all people of all faith teach about environmental protection, and what also unites all people of faith is that they use plastic. So we also have a responsibility to put this teaching of environmental care into practice by taking care of the plastic. We also see that faith communities are already everywhere, so they are in the wonderful location or situation that they could work as hubs to prevent ocean plastic where they already are. They have influence in the communities. People will listen to the priest or the imam in many places, and they can raise awareness in their communities to make people stewards and ambassadors of creation care. We have developed two models. One is for the global south and one is for the global north. In the global south, you have mostly the problem of mismanaged plastic, where plastic is being not discarded responsibly or properly. And so we are working with congregations to set up plastic collection points. It works like this: the members donate their plastic to the church. They segregate it at home. The church then sells it to our into our ecosystem. The church is being paid from us, and the church can use those extra income for social projects in their communities. At the same time, we have developed teaching materials, sermons, Bible studies, youth materials, where the church is teaching its members about the 5 R's, which is refuse, rethink, reduce, reuse, and recycle, to also minimize their waste footprint. It works similar to what Susan has explained. The church is setting up a kind of volunteer team. We call it the Plastic Bank Ambassador team. And this team is organizing this work. In the global north, we also teach people to reduce their plastic footprint. We also have a plastic footprint calculator. I will talk about that more, and people can neutralize their plastic through us. So the congregations who work with us, they get the training materials. We also have an online training platform where the material can be downloaded. The link is here. You can just check it out. And we also have teams on the ground in the countries where we work, where people can be coached as they participate in the program. So far, we are working with the Vatican. We are an official partner of the 7-year Laudato Si campaign through the Dicastery for the Promotion of Integral Human Development. We also a partner with the World Evangelical Alliance Center. We are part of United Nations Faith for Earth, and we have just started a program in Rio de Janeiro where we work with the Archdiocese to start 45 parishes doing plastic recycling, and 10 in the diocese in Victoria. We also, it means my time is off. We also work with the Archdiocese in Manila and with Diocese of Limburg in Germany, and we also creating rosaries and bracelets out of ocean plastic. Now, talking with buildings, we have created a tool where you can do a waste audit in your church. You can also do a waste audit at home. then it will teach you how to reduce your plastic at home, your plastic and your waste, like composting, recycling, changing your consumer lifestyles. I know there are some churches that have this one-time usable for communions. That is a very, of course, now for COVID we can understand, but that is very waste intensive. Here is also the link to our plastic footprint calculator, where you can check your own plastic footprint and you can neutralize your own plastic footprint. And the donation that will go to us in that way will be used to set up recycling infrastructure with congregation in the Global South. We also are looking into a new way to facilitate those partnerships if in the countries, many congregations in the Global North have partnerships with congregations in the Global South. So that could be worked out directly if they are in the areas of our operation, that the support from the Global North can be used to set up recycling in the partner congregation. So that is another option we are looking into. In the moment, our program is more geared toward Christianity, but we are also looking into other religions. As we are in Indonesia and Egypt, which are mostly Muslim countries, we would also be very interested to develop similar projects or programs for Islam and all the other religions that are there. Okay, thank you very much. Let's all be part of the solution and not the pollution.
Thank you so much, Peter. What a great presentation, and like you say, a really concrete opportunity for us all to be part of the solution. And I think it made me think, just as you were finishing up there, that there are, this is one of the great advantages of this program, is that we are sharing these very tangible tools. We've got a really good example from with the Cool Congregations calculator. We've got all these resources coming from Plastic Bank, and more often than not, these resources do exist out there. We don't need to always start from the beginning, and in the same way that we can all benefit from these wonderful resources, we may find that there might be participants here from Egypt or Indonesia or Muslim groups who might want to step forward and contact Peter and see how they can collaborate in the future. So to continue back round, as it were, through a circle, having looked at places of worship as a focal point for environmental witness, to then looking at faith-motivated businesses or venues and buildings, and then looking at the way in which we consume. I want to bring in now Reverend Dr. Al Bailey, who joins us from Baltimore. And you have not only a huge building which you use enormously to serve your faith, but also your community, and as well an enormous congregation who are making their influence in the community. And I'd like to hand over to you now to share more about what you're up to. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's made this possible. My name is Reverend Al Bailey. I serve on staff at the New Psalmist Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. We are a 7,000 plus member congregation sitting on a 33-acre campus with a building that's 175,000 square feet. It is a 3,000 seat sanctuary. And, you know, we're thankful to God to have it, but we have to make sure that we're using it in a very faith consistent way as it relates to conservation. And so I also come to you as the executive director of the Transforming Lives Community Development Corporation, which actually was birthed out of New Psalmist Baptist Church. And I want to share with you today simply how faith consistent uses of assets relate to conservation, and how this could help you to formulate your long-term plans. And so we're looking at a strategy for your faith long-term plans, because when you're considering your faith long-term plans, you have to be sure not only to look at how your faith seeks to better care for creation within your building, within your purchasing, within your consumptions, but what's most important is that you seek how your principles, how those faith principles translate into practical practices throughout your community, so that you're better being effective for all creation, and that effectiveness is for generations to come. It puts me in mind to two scriptures. Psalm 20 verses 1-2 says, "May the Lord answer you when you are in distress. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you." And here's the key verse. It says, may he send you help from the sanctuary and grant you support from Zion. And also the second scripture, Ecclesiastes 1:4, it says, "Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever." The reason that these two scriptures really resonated in my spirit was simply because we are living in a world that is filled with distress right now. And we have to be mindful as we make these long-term plans that we know that the help that we need is going to come from the sanctuary. It's going to come from the places in our houses of worship and our principles that we have in our faith, and that those principles must be put into practical practices so that generations will continue. Because if the generations continue it through your long-term plans, then the earth will remain forever. And so we'll look at conservation with our buildings and construction. And I'm just going to share with you some things that we've done in the church with our Community Development Corporation. When the pandemic hit us, our church building actually really began to reduce its carbon footprint because we literally moved all of our resources and all of our programming to a 100% virtual platform. Worship services, major events, Bible studies, all of our classes, the staff working from home. And we had to reimagine the way we did ministry because, again, the building was closed. And what we have realized, however, is a lot of the practices that we currently use in this virtual environment are practices that will remain post-pandemic. And so a lot of the things that we are doing now, we're finding actually were more beneficial and more effective in the pandemic. And so we're not going to go back to some of those old practices. We did actually do a building construction project. And one of the things that's very important about that is that this new construction project was not done in the typical standard way in our culture, in our community, where you go to a bank, you get a loan, and you pay on that loan. We said, no, we want our faith investors to invest in this particular project. And we literally had investors to pay for this new construction project. But also in doing that, we wanted to make sure in the building that we were more environmentally conscious. So we installed things like charging stations, making our building as green as possible. But also, we have to be sure that we look at conservation as it relates to healthcare. When the pandemic hit, we had to make sure that we were being a resource to help the most vulnerable populations and to conserve resources in the community. We began to say, how can we help make life better for other people? And so we said, what we will do is we'll start partnering with local healthcare providers. And what actually we did with our campus is we converted it to a healthcare satellite facility and began COVID-19 testing on our campus. Now, the building, again, is technically closed, but we could use that 33 acres to be able to help the most vulnerable populations in our community. Again, using your faith consistent asset to help the most vulnerable populations during this pandemic. To date, we've tested over 3,000 people for COVID-19 testing. And even with the building being closed, we're expanding those efforts. So now the church building is a satellite healthcare facility. So we're going to be looking to do flu shots and COVID-19 antibody testing. Our faith and our faith consistent partners also decided that they were going to invest their resources into providing a mobile healthcare unit to be able to assist in doing further vaccinations and healthcare screenings in the community. And lastly, conservation in purchasing and consumption is so important. Faiths can actually conserve, which we've been forced to do, honestly, in this COVID environment, but we can also help more people with consumption deficiencies by utilizing what's called a community development corporation, or a CDC, because that helps us to increase our partnerships. This is a separate corporation designed to forge partnerships, bring on investors so that your faith organization achieves its long-term plan. Our CDC has forged partnerships with food distribution organizations, organizations that care about health screenings and STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. And the companies range from private companies and corporations to nonprofit agencies to local banking institutions. Everybody wanted to do something to help people. And we said, let's use our faith consistent asset to be a hub for that. So we're conserving, but we're also helping at the same time. In 2020, we've actually been able to provide fresh produce and shelf-stable food to now over 5,000 families, which translates to over 13,000 people, where in 2019, we did much less than that. And we were in the building. Our faith partners, working with our healthcare partners at Total Healthcare, we've now again tested over 3,000 people. Our STEM team, when schools were closed and persons literally were not going out their homes too much unless they were getting exercise, we had virtual summer camps and helped kids to make sure that they got that academic information that they needed. And that still continues to go on in a virtual environment. Why is all this important? Because as you begin to create your long-term plans, these faith long-term plans, you have to utilize your faith principles and these new practices that you've developed, even during a pandemic, to help you reimagine how we do ministry that will be beneficial for generations to come. Again, we developed a community development corporation, a CDC, that's helped us explore new ways that we can reimagine ministry, community development, usage of our faith consistent assets, how we leverage partnerships, how we grow faith investors, all should be a part of your faith long-term plan. And your long-term plan has to be something that has what I call an infinite mindset, and it must have a just cause. Now, when I say an infinite mindset, do you understand that great societies, advancements in science and medicine have all happened simply because persons have had an infinite mindset? It's a mindset and a reality that, one, unites people under a common cause, where people literally choose to collaborate with something that sometimes doesn't have an end. And why do they do that? They do that simply because they're contributing to something that's bigger than themselves, something that will last beyond their lifetime. And so your faith long-term plans have to have this infinite mindset. An infinite mindset is also something that provides for our environment. It also provides for ourselves and our families. An infinite mindset is something that works for the interests of our faiths. It works for the interests of all humanity, and it works for the interests of all creation. We change our mindset to create this new world. Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. But not only does your faith long-term plan have to have an infinite mindset, finally, it has to have a just cause. Now, a just cause is something that is a specific vision of a future state that does not exist yet. It's a future state that's so appealing that people are willing to make sacrifices in order to help you achieve that long-term plan. It's a plan that defines where your faith is going. It describes a world that we hope to live in, and we will commit to building even past our lifetime. Our kids and our grandkids will take on this mantra and help and want to do this because they see this just cause. We don't fully know what it's going to look like when we start writing these long-term plans, but the reality will come forth as we move forward. Now, a just cause has to have 5 things, and I believe your faith long-term plan needs to have these 5 things as well. Your faith long-term plan has to be for something. It has to be affirmative, and it has to be optimistic. It must be inclusive, open to all who want to contribute, because your long-term plan, again, has to be something that goes on for generations and generations. It has to be service-oriented. You must be able to use your faith long-term plan as a primary benefit for the environment, like some of our other presenters have presented today, but it also must benefit other people. It must be resilient. This faith long-term plan must be able to endure political, technological, and even cultural change. And lastly, it has to be idealistic. It has to be big. It has to be bold, and ultimately unachievable, maybe even in your lifetime. The scripture that most is important here and applies is Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Your faith long-term plan has to have an infinite mindset, and it also has to have a just cause. Just some information about how our faith-consistent assets can be used even in this global pandemic, and how, as we write these plans, it's important that we have an infinite mindset and a just cause. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a treat to have you finish up for our contributors today. One of the things that I particularly appreciated in your presentation, I mean, first when I read it through, when you kindly sent it ahead of time, but particularly just now in the context of the other conversations that we're having, is about the mindset. And I think that this is the real gift of these plans and this program, is that it is faith motivated. And what is faith if not faithful? We need to ensure that what we're putting together is real, it's deliverable, it's accountable, and it has impact. But that said, it needs to be within the context of, as you put it, this infinite mindset. We don't know what's going to happen. We have to believe in something beautiful that's coming as the result of our labor, and it might not come in our lifetime, and that's okay, but that's what the faithful can contribute. Talking of which, we've had huge contributions from everybody, and I hope we've done justice to this huge topic around construction buildings and the wider use that they have in community. We've got lots of time for questions now. I'm going to bring in my colleague Pippa to help me field these questions. I know, oh yes, we've got our panelists back as well. Great. I know that some of you have posted questions already in the Q&A, and our incredibly diligent panelists have done their best at answering them already, which slightly gives us nothing to talk about now. But I think Pippa is going to give us a little roundup of what's been said, so that we can, if in case those of you who haven't been monitoring the Q&A don't miss the wisdom.
I will, yes, thank you, Alison. So we had many comments about how inspiring all of the presentations were, and just making sure that the presentations would be available afterwards. So just to reassure people, this whole webinar will be available on the Faith Invest website. We're also live streaming it to our Faith Invest Facebook page, and we will make the presentations available as well. So just to go over some of the questions that have been answered for the benefit of anybody not monitoring that, we had one that said, great presentation to Reverend Susan, very inspiring, and asked if the Cool Congregations calculator could be used effectively by people outside of the US, and if there were any plans to expand beyond. Reverend Susan, I will read your response. If there's anything you'd like to add, please do jump in. You said, I believe you can still use the calculator effectively outside of the US. The Cool Congregations Challenge program is US based at this time, but the calculator should work in other places. The only other thing I would need to ask our team is about the pre-filled data, which may be based on US zip codes. One other question we had to Peter from Plastic Bank, again commenting on the inspiring presentation, and asked if it was something that potentially faith groups could invest in as part of their values-driven investment portfolios. Peter, you responded, yes, we are working on an investor deck for impact investors and hope next year we could discuss this option.
That is correct, because we are really want to expand exponentially, which is necessary to avoid the plastic crisis, or to at least minimize it. And in order to expand, we need capital inflow, and so we are preparing an investor deck, especially for that, and we'll have investment drive by Q1, and so hopefully we can then share what investment options will be available and how it works.
Thank you. And as we have you here as well, Peter, I know Reverend Susan, you have a question for Peter, so I'd like to hand over to you to ask your question.
I do. Peter, I was very curious as you were sharing about the countries that you're working in right now. So many of them are being impacted by hurricanes and severe storms. And I really just wondered how that is impacting the work in those locations.
Yes, that is a very good question. And we were impacted by COVID, not as much as the normal recycling industry. They were more impacted by the fact that through COVID, the oil price went down, and then recycling plastic became more expensive than virgin plastic. So it means there also needs to be some kind of advocacy to make sure sustainable materials or environmental friendly materials can compete with not. Then another issue was we went into hibernation in Brazil. I know Brazil was hit very hard by the pandemic, especially in springtime and during the summer. So we just started this November, after 5 months of hibernation in Brazil, to open up again. Because Philippines is now very much hit by the storms. They had 5 storms in 3 weeks, and they all hit more or less the same areas. And now the main island of Luzon is in big areas underwater, and infrastructure has been destroyed, and also our collection has been affected, and of course our collectors also have struggles. So we have a kind of emergency fund or relief fund where companies can also contribute, where we do rehabilitation and disaster relief. We also did that during the COVID, when our collectors were not allowed to go out. In Haiti, for example, we distributed water filters and those kind of things. So that means once you start working in areas like this, you cannot just do business. You're working with people who have needs, and they're part of you, and you're part of them. So you have to be so in solidarity and do whatever you can, right?
Excellent, thank you. And while we touch on COVID, we have a comment and a question for you here, Reval. The comment, thank you, Reval. Fantastic to see how the New Psalmist Baptist Church is responding so flexibly to the pandemic to benefit your community. And a question from Hajat Sabiala from Uganda, who thanks you again for your presentation and asks what happens when somebody does test positive to COVID-19 and how you handle that as a church.
And that's a great question. We actually have had some what we call COVID scares, where we had someone test positive who was actually kind of working with our food distribution, and we had to follow our CDC protocols. We do our food distribution and COVID testing every 2 weeks. And so it kind of lends us the opportunity, if persons need to isolate or quarantine, it gives us opportunity for us to be able to do that safely, so that we're not stopping the need that exists in the community, and we're not stopping the COVID testing as well. But we make sure all of our people are equipped with the proper PPE. And again, all of that happens as the church building is conserving resources, but our partners are actually helping us in providing those resources.
Thank you, Reval. We have a question here from Dr. Coca Karishma from the Zoroastrian Trust Funds for Europe, which I may pass to you, Alison. Dr. Coca says, a very important concept is to be able to make choices after evaluating all knowledge. Is there a database or a point system of all the factors that need evaluating, and then give the points or a score depending on the background, and in brackets FaithPlans, and then allow the outcome to emerge from this?
Thank you. Yes, that is a great question. I can answer it in two ways. Firstly, to say, yes, there is going to be a lot of resources and information and suggested frameworks to create your plans, which will be compiled over the next couple of months, and we'll share details of how you can access that shortly. There isn't an explicit focus on point systems. We recognise that there is an enormous disparity between participating groups, not just in your faith traditions, but in the context and cultural and political context that you're all operating in. So it would become, unfortunately, too complex to create those sort of more detailed structures that would work effectively across the breadth and depth of participants. I hope that answers your question.
We have another question here from Elliot Hoffman, who has asked, do your organisations promote the idea among faith groups to use their voices to demand effective public policies by civic and political leaders? New energy systems and other infrastructure investments must be made at the systems level in addition to faith facilities and home. I see Reverend Susan and Reverend Al are both nodding. I will pass over to one of you.
So for us at New Psalmist, we actually have what we call a social action team. And so our social action team advocates for not only efforts for our congregation and our community, but they teach people how to advocate. And so that's very, very important that persons know how to make their voices known. But as an institution, New Psalmist Baptist Church also is a part of the United Nations Environment Program. And so we serve as a organization who sits with civil society. And so we're able to contribute to global actions that are taking place at the global level as a faith institution. And so where systems are being put in place, we said we wanted to be at the table when those decisions are being made. And so we took efforts with members of our congregation and community to become a part, an accredited organization who works with the United Nations Environment Program, so that we could help shape, as a part of civil society, what environmental policy looks like. And so we try to empower people on the ground through our social action work, so persons can get their political views heard by elected officials, but also work to help with the formation of systems.
That's beautiful. And I would just add on to that for Interfaith Power and Light, we take a systems approach to the issue of climate change. And so our programs like Full Congregation often are the way that people come into the door of this work and learn more, become educated on the issue. And we have advocacy programs that we can just move people into and up the ladder of engagement. So we have state affiliates in 40 US states, and we work at the local, the state, and the federal level on policy advocacy, which gives us a lot of ways to make progress. And additionally, in 2020, we ran a Faith Climate Justice voter campaign, which was on voter mobilization specifically. So trying to get people out to vote with the issue of climate and creation care in mind, and really pushing the fact that faith communities and people of faith and conscience can come at this issue through a moral lens, which gives us a different way of talking about the issue that is very much values-based, and goes back to a lot of what Reverend Bailey said earlier about their work in the congregation as being very values-based. So absolutely, we think it's a both and. We know that we have to make progress on the policy level, and that individual and congregational actions can really add up. So we definitely think of it as a both and.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
If I may just add one point, I think it's a very good point also in the terms of what comes our way with the plastic crisis. In the moment, we have about 90 million tons of mismanaged plastic per year. Until 2040, this will increase to about 240 million per year. And as far as ocean plastic is concerned, now we have about 10 million tons that goes into the sea. And by 2040 will be 30 million tons. So this cannot just be done by recycling. It needs a system change, how we deal with plastic, even with all the voluntary commitments of governments and industry to use more recycled plastic. The reduction will only be 7%, while the growth will be 147%. So this is not really going to work out. And so it needs the power of the consumer to be first informed what not to buy and what to buy to be more sustainable in their own consumption. But it needs a policy framework that really facilitates this system change. And we Plastic Bank, we have just started also the Plastic Bank Foundation, which will be mainly our advocacy arm to influence and to mobilize civil society and policymakers into that direction. We are very much in the beginning of that, but we have realized it's also a very important way to, if we want to see changes going to be happening.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. We have a question from Arthur Dahl that I will ask to Alison. Arthur says, faced with climate change impacts, is there an effort in these plans to increase the resilience of faith-owned facilities and to plan for the future?
Yes, another great question. You're all doing really well today. Yes, absolutely. It's a huge issue, isn't it? We need to think about not only mitigating the impact of climate change, but also how we're going to adapt and protect the most vulnerable in society and try and thrive as a species. Yes, absolutely, there is. We are going to be focusing on faith contributions to crisis and adaptation in later webinars, and that's part of thinking about how what is the faith contribution to dealing with natural disasters, dealing with the increase of environmental crises that we already are and will increasingly have to deal with, and also to think about where resilience and adaptation comes from through a faith lens.
Thank you, Alison. Got more flooding in. A question from Mandy Lee. How do you integrate environmental and climate justice into your efforts to explicitly address racial and economic disparities within congregations and communities? I wonder if, Reval, that's something that you would like to tackle?
Sure. We actually added into the conversation because oftentimes when we see communities that are adversely affected by environmental issues, things like asthma, which is very prevalent in communities of color, we then relate that to what's actually happening racially in our communities. And so we begin to link the two so that persons actually see that if in fact you are living in a community where you have a high population who has health issues like asthma, it's probably related to poverty issues. And you begin to see the connection that exists between the two, and how if we better care for our environment, we will also better care for our health. And it becomes an issue where we work the two of the issues together.
Thank you. And I think we have two more questions here for Peter, actually. So I think there may be all we have time for the rest of the session. The first, Peter, is from Hajat, who is asking about how you got startup support and the logistics involved in that to start up Plastic Bank.
Our founder, David Katz, he is an entrepreneur his whole lifetime. And so actually he made quite a lot of money with his previous business, which he sold off to start Plastic Bank. And what he basically did was for the first few years, he financed Plastic Bank from his own wealth. So when I started with Plastic Bank 4 years ago, we were 10 people globally, and now we're about 100. And so until we were able really to get some revenue, it took about two years, yeah. And so it was really a sacrifice of the behalf of David Katz to have faith that this investment will finally pay off.
Thank you, Peter. And then the final question again to Peter, who asks if there are any recycling points based in the global north, and asks particularly about the US, or are they all focused on collection points currently in the global south?
Currently, we are only in the global south, yes.
Excellent, thank you. I think that's all we have time for in terms of questions, so I will pass back over to you, Alison.
Thank you so much. What great questions and wonderful answers as well. I feel like you never really know how these sessions are going to go, other than we've got good people, and I trust that interesting folk will turn up too. But I hope that we have addressed this enormous and important issue with due process. I want to thank all of our panelists very much for giving up their time. I feel sure that there may be more questions for them. If you aren't able to contact them directly, then please just do let us know, and we will do our best to pass on your questions or concerns. I also want to just reiterate to participants who are involved in this program to stay in touch with us. We really want to support you and hear how we can use this series of webinars, which I've mentioned earlier, but I think the details of which have been posted in the chat, to support you in your plan creation. I often refer to this as being an open framework. It's for you to decide what you want to put in your plan. And we see our role as trying to stretch your thinking and give you as many inspiring and interesting ideas, and to make connections and generally leave you feeling full of possibility, as well, obviously, as following that up with supportive partners who might be able to bring in expertise to help you in the delivery of your plan. But we can't do this if we don't know your thoughts. So please do come forward and let us know what you're thinking, what you would like to see. How can we help you in the coming months as you deliberate on what truly amazing things you are going to commit to. So I'm going to say goodbye to all of you, encourage you to stay in touch, thank our panelists once again, and ask you all, please, 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 to stay on just for a moment or two and answer 3 very quick questions for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
much.
Take care. Blessings and peace.